Turning to tech, nations try to track and trace their way out of the corona crisis. Some see apps as essential.
There are currently over 3.5 million downloads and registrations of the COVID Safe app, and there needs to be millions more. This is incredibly important.
But apps have had limited success. Australia's has picked up only one case in a month. And privacy concerns remain, with the citizens' every move being monitored. Some countries, like Japan, appear to have fought off the virus without the help of such technology. So, are tracking apps really key to fighting COVID-19? I'm Monica Jones, thanks for joining. Well, not everyone is keen on installing a tracing app on their phone. But in countries such as India, there's little choice. People there must download a state-backed tracing app if they want to travel.
Travelling home within a new normal. Long stops and security checks abound as India exits its weeks-long lockdown. Aradhya Sinha had to wait weeks to get a ticket home to Ahmedabad. But it isn't just tickets and temperatures that matter. He also had to download India's contact tracing app, Arogya Setu. It is mandatory for all passengers to use it. Critics of the app have raised serious privacy concerns, but Sinha sees it as a necessary evil.
You have to always keep your location on, the Bluetooth on, so that they collect the data that with whom you have interacted or close that. I think in the present time it is a little bit required also, because if somebody is infected, and I should also know in late.
India's contact tracing app continually tracks the location of users, allowing it to alert those who may have come close to someone who later tests positive for coronavirus. Critics worry that this means a centralized government database has near seamless information about the location of millions. Indian authorities, however, insist that of the app's millions of users, only the data of those thousands detected COVID positive is being tracked to alert their contacts. And even their data would be deleted 60 days after they had recovered.
There is no possibility of surveillance or any such issue. Our privacy policy is very clear and is readily available.
But privacy activists are not satisfied. They say an app this invasive needs to be more transparent about its data storage and source code.
We need more than just statements suggesting that it's safe, etc. We need to see proof. And for that, they have to open source the app and allow it to be tested by independent security researchers. I don't think we can take what this government says at face value.
The Indian government has rolled back its earlier efforts to mandate the app's download. Yet, it strongly recommends its use.
To help stop the spread of the coronavirus, you must download the Arogya Setu mobile app.
Many users, however, do not share or understand the concerns of privacy activists.
I think life is more important than privacy for now.
What do I care about my privacy? It's okay. It's for our benefit.
Even if the app is invading their privacy, it at least appears to be succeeding in making many feel more secure.
Now, Professor Masa Salati is a specialist on digital epidemiology at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, the EPFL, and he joins us now. Good to have you with us. You just attended, I believe, a press conference on the new Swiss proximity tracing app, which was co-developed by the EPFL. How's the app going to slow the spread of SARS-CoV-2?
Well, we're less interested, I guess, in slowing the spread. We really want to sort of prevent another wave from happening. I think that's where the apps will shine the most, because they will support the contact tracing, which is so important to break the transmission chains.
But that hasn't happened with all the apps already existing. We certainly know that the Australian COVID-19 app only found one case in a month. Do we know what the problem is?
Well, so one has to be seen that before today, it was essentially impossible to really build a contact tracing app that would work on all phones. So all the apps that have been released before today have had these severe issues that they didn't work properly, especially on iPhones, because the operating system just wouldn't allow you to send and receive signals in the background. So I think most efforts so far have been hampered because of that. And now that Google and Apple have come out with their joint effort API that can now be used by health governments around the world, that will change dramatically.
But you say up until today, those tracing apps didn't really work well. China has managed pretty well tracing and isolating cases with its mandatory app. Could that have something to do with it?
So we have to be careful, right, when we say what tracing. I mean, you can trace people, for example, on movement, but this is not what we want, at least not here in Europe. We want to trace contacts, close proximity contacts. And this you can do with Bluetooth, where the Bluetooth signal can measure the distance or estimate the distance between phones. That was not possible on all phones until today when that API is accessible. What the others have done, Iceland, China, and so on, that's not real proximity tracing. That's tracking of people's movements, and that's very different, and it's certainly not something we're interested in doing here.
So how reliable will this proximity tracing Swiss app be?
So I think it will be quite reliable, and I have to say, right, it's not just the Swiss. I mean, there's many countries around the world that are now rapidly building these apps based on these APIs. Whether they work and to what extent, of course, that remains to be seen. We have to be open-minded. But keep in mind, all these apps are doing is they're essentially following the same protocol that you would follow if you had a human contact tracer. So the idea is really only to build these apps and provide them as an add-on to the human contact tracers. So that means measuring distances of around 6 feet, 2 meters with about 15 minutes. And then alert people if they have been in contact with an infected person through these means.
But ultimately, these apps are only useful if people actually install them. Most of those apps, including the Swiss one, is voluntary. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we think it does make sense. We have run a lot of surveys, and many other European countries have done that before, where it was shown that that the willingness of the population is here. And it turns out, and sort of making reference to your previous report, that the more transparent you are about this app and the more trustworthy you are. So, for example, in the Swiss case, and I think the same will be true in many other countries, the app has been open source from day one. The protocols are completely transparent, and people can really trust this app. And so we think that there should not be a mandatory rule, and indeed that has now actually been prohibited in Switzerland by law, and I think that will be the case in many other countries.
So with about 20 seconds to go, how big a role will tracing apps, proximity apps, play in fighting the pandemic?
Yeah, we think it will play an important role. Contact tracing is known to be really a key strategy to keep this virus in check, and these apps will support that. And I think the combination of human contact tracing and app contact tracing is really a match-winning combination.
All right, Professor Masa Salati there from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And now it's time for your questions on the coronavirus. Here's our science correspondent, Derek Williams.
Since we don't acquire lasting immunity to other coronaviruses in circulation, how likely is it we could develop lasting immunity to SARS-CoV-2?
There's still a lot we don't know about immunity and coronaviruses. Everyone is still being pretty cagey about whether people who contract COVID-19 have any immunity afterwards, including the experts at the WHO. No one wants to go out on a limb, but pretty much everyone believes they do, at least to some extent. So assuming that, the question then becomes, for how long? Many virologists making educated guesses assume that having the disease will provide people who recover with at least some protection against reinfection for at least a year. Antibody levels against the other coronaviruses that affect us are usually detectable in recovered patients for longer than that before they start to wane. The length of immunity will probably be linked, among other factors, to how badly SARS-CoV-2 affected someone. So to answer your question, based on the evidence from other coronaviruses, no, permanent immunity doesn't look that likely. But at least if you get the pathogen a second time somewhere down the road, it is likely that you'll have a milder case.
Does COVID-19 cause thrombosis?
A growing stack of data gained from hospital observation and autopsies indicates that thromboses, blood clots, are a common complication seen in COVID-19 patients. Some studies show that 20 to 30% of critically ill patients develop them. It's taken a while to recognize how common the symptom is because it got a little lost in the focus on the respiratory side of the disease. Although doctors still don't know what's causing the clotting to occur, they're now increasingly testing new clot-busting and blood-thinning drugs in severely ill COVID-19 patients in an attempt to lower mortality rates. But progress will take a while. Many of those drugs can also be dangerous if they're given at the wrong time or in the wrong doses.
Is it true that SARS-CoV-2 has been found in semen?
A recent small-scale study from China did indeed find the virus in semen. The researchers checked samples from 38 men in various stages of the sickness, and 6 of those samples were positive for SARS-CoV-2. Various medical experts say that isn't all that surprising because as the virus replicates in the body, it also circulates through bodily fluids. The study also detected only viral RNA, but didn't seek to determine whether it was active or not. So it's still unclear if the virus can also be transmitted sexually. But although that information might be interesting, it seems to me it won't really increase anyone's risk in the short term. I mean, after all, if you're being that intimate with someone who's infected and shedding virus, the chances are probably pretty high that you'll catch it through respiratory droplets. We know it spreads that way.